In February 2023, Americans watched in shock as fighter jets shot down mysterious objects in the sky, and fear quietly spread. What exactly was flying over the United States? Live news banners screamed about unidentified objects, and an unsettling question formed in millions of minds. Were these harmless intrusions, or the beginning of something far more dangerous? As missiles streaked through the cold winter air, families stared at their TVs with a mix of curiosity and dread, wondering if a hidden threat had finally arrived above their own town. For a brief, tense moment, the ordinary American sky, once a symbol of safety and freedom, felt like an open door to unknown powers and unseen intentions. This is the story of the strange objects the U.S. military shot down in 2023, the panic they triggered, and the unsettling uncertainty they left behind. To understand how these events shook the country, we have to start with a different object: a massive high-altitude balloon drifting silently over U.S. soil. In late January 2023, that balloon was first detected as it crossed into U.S. airspace, and officials quickly realized it wasn't just another weather device floating off course. By early February, Americans could literally look up and see the object with their own eyes, turning the sky into a stage for a high-stakes geopolitical drama. The U.S. government publicly accused China of operating a surveillance balloon, igniting outrage, fear, and a wave of questions about how secure the nation's airspace really was. On February 4th, an F-22 Raptor finally brought the balloon down off the coast of South Carolina, and the explosion over the ocean felt like a long-awaited release of national tension. But instead of relief, the takedown opened a new chapter of anxiety, as people realized that if one unauthorized object could cross the country, others might be doing the same. Almost immediately, defense officials began rethinking how they watched the skies, quietly adjusting radar systems that had long filtered out clutter to focus on traditional threats. When those filters were loosened, NORAD and U.S. Northern Command suddenly began seeing far more objects than before, and the line between harmless debris and potential danger blurred. The U.S. military, now on edge after the balloon incident, leaned toward caution, treating unknown radar tracks less like curiosities and more like possible threats. On February 10, 2023, that caution turned into action when an unidentified object was detected flying over the remote, frozen expanse of northern Alaska. Flying at around 40,000 feet, this object was considered a risk to civilian air traffic, and that single detail made the situation not just strategic, but deeply personal for anyone who flew. An F-22 jet fired an AIM-9X Sidewinder missile, and in the stark Arctic air, another mysterious craft fell from the sky, leaving more questions than answers. Officials struggled to describe exactly what it was, using words like cylindrical and small, and that vagueness only fueled public unease and imagination. Recovery teams faced brutal conditions in Alaska's icy wilderness, reminding the world that even with advanced technology, finding wreckage on Earth can be as hard as spotting objects in space. The very next day, February 11th, another unknown object appeared over Canada's Yukon territory, dragging the mystery across borders and into international focus. With Canada's approval, a U.S. F-22 once again fired a missile, and another unidentified object was destroyed, deepening the sense that something unusual was unfolding in North American airspace. People began to wonder if the continent had always been this busy with strange airborne objects, or if something had suddenly changed in a way no one fully understood. On February 12th, a third object was tracked over Lake Huron near the U.S.-Canada border, moving slowly at a height where commercial airplanes roam. Concerned about flight safety, the U.S. ordered it shot down as well, and the roar of another intercept echoed across a tense weekend of headlines and speculation. 3 unidentified objects downed in 3 days, on top of a suspected spy balloon, made the storyline feel less like routine defense and more like a crisis in slow motion. Government briefings acknowledged that these objects were not behaving like typical commercial aircraft, but they also stopped short of labeling them weapons or confirmed spy platforms. The public was left suspended between reassurance and alarm, hearing that there was no direct evidence of hostile intent, but no clear answers about what had been destroyed. Reporters pressed officials on whether these could be extraterrestrial, and while leaders firmly denied any indication of that, The very need to answer the question showed how unsettled people felt. Behind the scenes, investigators began piecing together what they could. Flight paths, radar data, pilot observations, and whatever fragments they might salvage from unforgiving terrain and deep water. The harsh reality was that recovery operations for small debris in remote ice fields, rough seas, and deep lakes often bordered on impossible, especially under winter conditions. As days passed, early hints emerged that at least some of the objects might have been linked to private or research activities, not hostile military operations. U.S. officials started suggesting that these could be benign balloons used by commercial entities, hobbyists, or research groups, suddenly caught up in a post-balloon panic. The idea that innocent devices might be mistaken for threats highlighted a painful dilemma. In a world of evolving danger, how much caution is too much, and how little is too little? At the heart of this dilemma stood institutions like NORAD, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies, all racing to adapt their rules to a new reality. Radar systems long tuned to ignore slow-moving, small targets were now pulling those targets into view, turning once invisible clutter into urgent military decisions. This technical shift showed how invisible policies and settings could suddenly change what a nation sees, and how that vision shapes what it fears. Legal and policy frameworks, designed for clear, traditional aircraft, were suddenly being stretched to deal with ambiguous objects that didn't fit neatly into old categories. Leaders had to decide, often in hours, whether an unidentified object met the legal threshold to be considered a potential threat, knowing that waiting too long could risk lives in the skies. Public communication struggled to keep pace with events as officials tried to balance transparency with national security and clarity with the honest admission of uncertainty. In press rooms and televised briefings, phrases like unmanned, unknown origin, and no indication of direct threat became the uneasy language of official calm.